Arthur Hawkwing had died, throwing the future of his massive empire into peril. The unknown fate of the late king's children sent overseas, as well as the unsettled succession issue, heralded a storm that was to unleash on a scale no one suspected. In the years after the death of the Great Unifier, the entire process of bringing peace to the Westlands and defending it from the Blight will collapse, leading to an era of greater chaos than even the War of the Second Dragon. As the last decades of the new era pass, the stage is set for the most important and chaotic event since the breaking of the world. Sit back, because in the latest episode of the Wheel of Time series, we will bring you closer to the events of the War of the 100 Years, the conquest of one of the kingdoms by the forces of the Blight, and the rebirth of a hero of the Second Age. With the last breath of Arthur Paindrag Tanriel, the Empire collapsed. Potential contenders who had any chance of maintaining the massive realm died one by one, with the governors of the provinces and the nobles of the former kingdoms wanting to free themselves and be independent once more. The first region to secede was the province of Andor, governed by Andara Kasalain, daughter of the last Aldishar king Jol Ramadar. Andor declared independence, with Kasalain declaring herself its queen. Andara submitted to her daughter, who rushed to Tar Valon to gain the support of the army that besieged the Aes Sedai city. Arriving on the scene, she tried to convince the commander, Soren Maravile, who was privately her lover, to lift the siege. The general wanted to hold the siege as Hawkwing wished, but convinced by Ashara that the empire was collapsing, he abandoned Tar Valon. Around the same time, the queen formed an alliance with the new Amelin seat, Diane Araman, promising to support the policies of the White Tower in return for the support of the Aes Sedai. Moreover, she promised to send her firstborn daughter to be trained at the tower, and her firstborn son to be trained as a warder. Returning to the city of Camelin, the capital of her new kingdom, Ishara began to expand her domain. With the help of Soran's armies, she established her borders on the Kara River to the west and the Arenin River to the east, but it took them 5 years to reach these frontiers. The borderlands were another area that split off from the empire almost immediately. 5 provinces, Arafel, Shi'anar, Seldaea, Kandor and Malkia, broke from the realm. However, they did not participate in the partition of the Hawkwing state. Considering that the peace from the Blight since the Battle of Taladar may end someday, the rulers formed a defensive alliance to support each other in case of a Trolloc invasion on one of the signatories' lands. Without meddling in the affairs of the lands further south, they were safe from this side and did not have to worry about a possible invasion. On the southeastern edge of the empire, 2 nobles, Esteban Navarez and Isidre Terrado, took over the Stone of Tyr and the city surrounding the fortress. The remaining nobles from the region of the former kingdoms of Forgancia and Morena supported the efforts of Navarez and Terrado, but did not allow either of them to become king. Instead, a council was appointed, composed of great lords, whose number grew over time from 6 to 200 members. In the following months and years after the death of the founder of the United Westland, other states were formed. In the former Kingdom of Balasun, the trio of nobles, Harin Masid, Tarzenian Nerenhald, and Borol Amadia, took over the city of Tanchico to form the Tarabon Kingdom. Over the years that followed, they repulsed the attacks of pretenders seeking to renew the Kingdom of Balasun, and even expanded the borders of their young state, occupying the vast majority of the Old Kingdom. When Lord Borol was assassinated, Harenet Tarzenia formed a government, with Masid given the title of Panarch and Nerenhald becoming queen. Southeast of Tar Valon, in the port city of Cahian, a group of nobles from the former Kingdom of Tova concluded an agreement to restore the erstwhile state, and gathered for a feast in the provincial capital to celebrate the rebirth of their old nation. This ball was a cover for treachery, as, during it, all the nobles with connections to the former Tovan chancellors were killed. As a result of this massacre, chaos reigned in the province, which was averted after a few months when Matrain Colm Seal took over the city and was proclaimed the first king of Cahian. As the war in which various kingdoms tried to snatch as much of the old empire as possible raged throughout the Westland, more states were formed. Besides those previously mentioned, the countries that were born and survived 100 years of constant conflict were Ared Doman, Altaria, Amadisia, Gildan, Morandi, Mayenne, and Ilian. After this 100 years interregnum, the next major seismic event was the Fall of Malia. Founded by Shivar Jamel after Arthur Hawkwing's death, the kingdom had 1,000 years of history of surviving as the northernmost land in the Westlands, while surrounded on 3 sides by blight. Problems arose when the brother of King Alakir Mandragoran of Malia, named Lane, led his 5,000 warriors towards Sheol Ghul. The expedition ended in disaster, as most of the warriors who followed Lane did not return home. The wife of the king's brother, named Brayan, who died during the expedition, was jealous that Akir and not her husband was the king. She accused the king of his brother's death, explaining that Lane died because he did not receive Akir's support. As revenge, she conspired with Cohen Gamalan, one of the High Lords of Malia, to put her son, Isam, on the throne of the kingdom. Cohen Gamalan was known as Cohen Fairheart for his heroic wartime victories against the Blight, but no one suspected that jealousy towards Alakir bloomed in the heart of the nobleman as it did in Brayan's. However, during the last election, he lost to the current king by 2 votes, and this defeat pushed him to Shaitan's side, making him Dark Friend. Agreeing to Brayan's intrigue, he drew troops from the border forts towards the capital, leaving the north of Malia almost undefended. Not long after, Jain Charin, called Farstrider, captured Cohen, and the High Lords sentenced him to death. Alakir single-handedly killed Gamalan, but the fall of the kingdom was already sealed. When the rebellion was put down, Brayan fled with her son Isam from the city of the 7 Towers, but fell into the hands of the Trollocs, who spread across the land when Dark Friend Fairheart recalled the troops from the border. Seeking to delay the advance of the Shadowspawn horde to the capital of Malia, Alakir and his wife Eliana led the remnants of the Malkieri forces into the Battle of Herod's Crossing, which ended in complete defeat for the defenders. Before the royal couple marched on the Trollocs, they ordered their newborn son, Lan, to be brought to them. In a quick and relatively intimate ceremony, Alakir, in the presence of several High Lords, appointed his son the next king of Malia, placing a sword in his cradle and anointing the child's forehead with oil, giving him the title of Daishan, Diademed Battle Lord. Then Elian assigned 20 of the best swordsmen of the King's Guard to him, and sent them all to the city of Falmoran. Only 5 managed to reach their destination with the boy. As the armies of Malkieri were dying at Herod's Crossing, the other kingdoms of the borderlands rallied their troops to help their comrades, but they did not arrive in time. The White Tower also sent help in the form of 100 sisters, but when they reached Malkia, they turned back, claiming that the kingdom could not be saved. Later propaganda spread by opponents of the Aes Sedai claimed that Tarvalon did not send reinforcements at all, while the Amelin seat did not deny these rumours, recognizing that it would be worse if word of the failure of their mission spread. As the allied armies of the borderlands crossed the border, the Blight swallowed up the fallen state. However, this did not prevent the Shadowspawn from being defeated in the Battle of the Stair of Jihan, but the Trollocs were not driven beyond the former boundaries of Malkieri. For the first time in nearly 2,000 years since the Trolloc Wars, a kingdom had fallen to the forces of Shaitan. The people who did not perish in the invasion took refuge in the other kingdoms. Several years after the fall of Malkia, another kingdom began to head towards political chaos. Coming from the Blue Ajas, Gitara Moroso, advisor to Mordrellin Mantir, Queen of Andor, possessed the gift of foretelling. In the year 971 of New Era, NE, she persuaded the Queen's son, Luke, who would become the first Sword Prince, to travel to the Blight, saying that the outcome of the last battle depended on it. Luke set out and was pronounced dead shortly thereafter, but as it turned out many years later, his fate was much worse. A year later, the Aes Sedai persuaded the Queen's daughter, Tigraine, to go to the Isle Wastes, explaining that if she did not, the world would be lost. Additionally, Tigraine Mantir could not return until the Maidens of the Spear moved on to Tarvalon. Tigraine left Camillin, leaving behind her the title of daughter heir, as well as her husband, Taringail Damodred of Cahian, and their son, Galadedrid. Arriving in the Aiel Wasteland, she was found by the Spear Maidens of the Tardad clan, whom she later joined, taking the name Shael. After the disappearance of her children, Queen Mordrellin died of grief, and with no designated successors, the nobles of Andor converged to elect a new queen. Yes, a queen, for the events of the 100 Years' War had developed a matriarchal system of government in this kingdom. Several houses declared their claim to the throne, sparking a brief civil war that ended when the 15-year-old head of House Trakand, Morghese, seized the throne. To strengthen her rights to the throne, she married Taringail Damodred, with whom she had 2 children, a daughter Elaine and a son Gawain. Taringail was later murdered by a royal bard, who was privately the queen's lover, when he tried to put himself on the throne of Andor and appoint his son Galadedrid as heir. When the children of Mordrellin disappeared from Andor, Taringail's uncle, Laman Damodred, ruled Cahian from 965 NE. When the king's nephew became the husband of the new queen of Andor, rumours began to circulate in the kingdom that Taringail was not Morghese's equal, which badly affected Cahian's image. Consequently, conspiracies to overthrow the king began to form. Laman, like most of the inhabitants of his kingdom, was very familiar with the game of houses, Des Demar, a web of intrigue and conspiracy. Wanting to stand out above other families and show that both Cahian and its ruler were strong, he began to hatch his own machinations. One of them was the cutting down of Avendar Eldera, a sacred tree given to the Cahians by the Aiel in exchange for their ancestors' help during the breaking of the world. News of the cutting of the tree, which was a sapling derived from the Tree of Life, Avendasora, and the creation of a throne from it, spread widely throughout the Westland, and even beyond, to the Aiel Waste. When the inhabitants of the Threefold Land, as the Aiel called their home, heard of this, they gathered their warriors and went to punish Laman for what they considered a betrayal. Only 4 of the 12 clans went to war, later known in the Westland as the Aiel War. They were Nakai, Rhain, Sharad, and Tardad. At the head of the 80,000 warriors was the chieftain of the Tardad clan, Janduin. In the spring of 976, the Aiel crossed the spine of the world, but were initially ignored by both Laman and the other rulers. Only the capture of Cahian and the king's escape changed the attitude towards this invasion. As revenge for the cutting of the tree, the Aiel burned Cahian, sparing only the libraries. Damodred fought the invaders for the next 2 years. As time passed, more nations sent reinforcements, fearing that the Aiel were here to conquer, and that they would not stop at Cahian and would move on toward the sea. With the help of Tar Valon, a grand coalition was formed, consisting of 10 of the 14 kingdoms of the Westland. The alliance forces were to gather at Tar Valon and then move on to the Aiel. The forces of the Grand Coalition included about 7,000 soldiers from Cahian under the command of Laman Damodred, 29,000 Shianarians under Lord Agelmar Jagad, 28,000 soldiers from Andor led by Lord Aranvor Naldwin, 26,000 Ilianas under the leadership of their king Matin Stepanios den Balgar, 12,000 warriors from Tar Valon led by Captain Azil Marid, 21,000 Araphelians under Lord Harari Nachiman, 5,000 men from Gildan, led by Lord Alishin Telvain, 4,000 warriors from Amadisia under the command of Lord Aemon Senhold, and 4,000 Children of the Light, led by their leader, Lord Captain Commander Pedron Nile. In addition, 3,500 Altarans arrived at Tar Valon, alongside 4,000 Morandi soldiers, and an unknown but small number of men from Arad Doman under the command of Redel Ituralde and Malkieri under the now adult Lan Mandragoran. In total, the coalition forces numbered about 160 to 170,000 soldiers, and outnumbered the Aiel forces more than 2 to 1. But that didn't mean that the Aiel Waste's warriors had no chance. Life in the Land of the Three Folds was harsh, to put it mildly, so to survive, one had to be extremely tough. Hence, each individual Aiel was of significantly greater combat value than his counterpart in the coalition army. The Aiel were led by a singular leader, Janduin, while the coalition forces were split. Some saw the commander-in-chief in Laman Damodred, others in Agelmar Jagad. A compromise was made, according to which the high command was to fall to each of the leaders in turn. For the first 2 days, the battle, later named the Battle of the Shimmering Walls or Battle of Red Snow, was fought on the banks of the Arenin River. The coalition deployed its forces to defend against attacks from all sides and to protect Tar Valon, the largest city in the Westland. The lack of a concentrated defense resulted from a lack of awareness of the Aiel's purpose. The commanders believed that the savages, as they called the inhabitants of the Land of Three Folds, wanted to raze the city to the ground, as they had done with Caerhien. Unlike them, the Aiel had a very clear goal: to kill Laman Damodred, but their plan hit a serious obstacle. Unfamiliar with the customs of the Westland kingdoms, and faced with many commanders, they had trouble identifying the place and person of the King of Caerhien. During these 2 days, the clash remained inconclusive, but still many people died. The greatest surprise for the coalition soldiers was the presence of women among the Aiel. In the ranks of the Janduin horde, there were maidens of the spear, among whom fought Shael, who broke her commander's ban by going into battle heavily pregnant from none other than Janduin. On the 3rd day of the battle, the 1st of Danu 978, November 24th, there was a breakthrough. The Aiel managed to kill the Andorran commander, causing panic in the coalition's second largest contingent. Soon after, they managed to find Laman Damodred and kill him, along with 2 of his brothers. After completing their task, the Aiel took the king's sword as proof of his death and retreated across the river in the night in an extremely organized manner. In the morning, the coalition commanders, seeing the Aiel heading towards the wasteland, decided that the invaders understood they would not succeed and returned home. Believing they had forced the enemy to retreat, the coalition gave chase, pushing the enemy southeast towards Kinslayer's Dagger, one of the branches of the Spine of the World. Over the next few days, the Aiel successfully fended off attacks on their rearguard. When they reached the mountains, their forces scattered and returned to the wastes. The members of the coalition realized that all the Aiel wanted was Laman's death. However, they didn't want to lose face in the eyes of society, and victory over the invaders was announced. The victory was paid with heavy losses on both sides. The exact numbers are unknown. Among the dead, however, were King Caerhien and his 2 brothers, Maresin and Aldecane, Lord Arinvon Naldwin of Andor, and Shael, formerly known as Tigrain Mantir. Unknown is the person who inflicted a mortal wound on the former heir to the Andorran throne. It is known, however, that in the last moments of her life, she was accompanied by a soldier from the Ilian army, Tam al-Thor. The warrior, seeing the woman dying and giving birth, took the newborn boy with him when his mother gave her last breath. At the very moment when Shael's son was born, Gitara Moroso, who was in the White Tower in the company of 2 accepted ones, Sean Sanche and Moraine Damodred, relative of the slain Laman, made her last prophecy. "He is born again, I feel him. The dragon takes his first breath on the slope of Dragon Mount. He is coming, he is coming. Light help us, light help the world. He lies in the snow and cries like thunder. He burns like the sun." Then she passed. Indeed, he was born, and in the next videos in this series, we will talk about the dragon and his war against the Dark One. More videos on the Wheel of Time series are on the way, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.